If you work in accounting or finance or sales, one of the requests you might get from your boss is to calculate the sales that the company's done or that you've done in the past few weeks, few months, whatever the case may be. And while calculating a summation isn't really hard in Excel, I'm going to show you how you can calculate trailing values without having to adjust your formula each time that you add data for, let's say, a new month or a new week, whatever the case may be. So in my first example, and I'm going to show you how to do it both ways, both vertically and horizontally, depending on how your data goes. So let's say in this case, I want to get the data for the last X amount of days. So I'll type in last X days. And what I'm going to do in this case is show you just how this will work. So normally you might do something like this. You do the summation and get the last 5 values. But the problem is this is not going to be dynamic, right? This is not going to be the last 5 days. You would have to adjust this. Let's say you've got new data, you update it, you'd have to adjust your formula. So I'm going to show you how we can do this with making it more dynamic than that. So the key is to use the offset function. And the offset function, what it does is allows you to determine the size of your range. So with the offset function, we first have to start with a reference, a starting point. And I always like to set this before my data begins. So in this case, right before that first value, because how the offset function works is it's going to jump X number of cells. And so you can do it on your first data set or your first data point, but then you're just gonna have to adjust for that first value. And I'll show you in the next example how that works. But in this case, I'm starting it just before my data begins. And now I'm gonna use the count A function to say, okay, look at these values here, count how many are not blank. And I can make this go to, let's say, row 100, just to be safe so I don't have to adjust my range. I can do the entire column if I wanted to. The key is, make it large enough to ensure that it's going to get all your possible future values that you may enter. If you're going to add, potentially have 1,000 data points, you want to make sure you accommodate that, whatever the case may be. So the count A function is going to count the number of data values that I've got in there. For columns, I'm not offsetting because I'm not moving any columns. I just have the one column, so I don't want to offset. For the height of this is now how many days I want to calculate. So in this example, let's say I want to calculate the 5 most recent days. So I'm going to type in -5. And for the width, it's just going to be 1 because I've only got one column here. So I'm going to close this out. And now I've got a value of 52. And that is the sum of these 5 values. They add up to 52. Now let's say I add like a really large number, 1,000 here. We're going to see this value automatically updates now to 1045. Now it's pulling these 5 values. And that's the beauty of using the offset function here is it's automatically detecting how large my range is. And then by using that -5, it's telling me it's pulling the last 5 values from the bottom. So let's take a look at how it's calculating. So if I go to evaluate formula, we can see it's counting that there's 16 values, non-blank values. So it started from 4. So 4 plus 16 puts me at row 20, right? And if it's grabbing the last 5, it's including this most recent one, so it's going to grab the last 5. And that's how it works. So it's going from 16 to 20. So it's pulling in that range. So if I added this range, it's automatically going to adjust. Now, let's do the horizontal side. Now let's see we want the sales for the last 3 months. Right? So let's say last 3 months. And we can, of course, adjust this. If I wanted to, in this example, look at the last 6 days, easy enough, -6, right? Not a problem. In this example, going across, let's say I want to pull the last 3 months. So this is going to be similar. So I'm going to use the offset function again. This time I'm going to show you how it works when my reference point is my first value. So in this case, I've got that. This time I'm not jumping any rows because I want to stay on that same row. Instead, I'm going to count the columns. So I'm going to use the count A function. And in this case, start from E5 all the way. Let's just type in ZZ5. Really, really far into my spreadsheet, way beyond what I'm going to need. But anyways, I'm going to use that just to make it easy. Now in this case, I'm going to have to do a -1 because my reference point starts right there. If I set it right here, I would not have to do that -1. So that's just to make sure that my column count is correct. Now for the height, this is going to be 1 because I've got one row. So think of height as going vertically. So I don't want to expand beyond this height. So it's going to be set to a row of a height of 1 to get that one row. Now for the width, this is where I can specify how many months I want to go back. And in this case, I can type in -3. So I go 3 months back. And again, let's close this out. And now it gives me 15,000. So these three values add up to 15,000. So let's say May is a really big month. Let's say we got 25,000 here. What that's going to do, update to $38,000 here. So as you can see, it's just a matter of updating which range you want to adjust, whether you want to adjust vertically or horizontally. All you need to do is adjust for these different arguments. So in this case, we did -3 when it was the width, but we could adjust the height as well. So different components will allow you to adjust your range accordingly. But by using the offset function, you have a lot more flexibility to create one single formula that's going to be dynamic and versatile enough. So if your range changes, it's going to factor in for that, and you're not going to have to worry about having to adjust it. And you can set this range so it's a lot larger than it needs to be, because the count A function is just going to go through and count all those non-blank values in there. And so it's automatically going to know what you've got in there. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is, if I type in a value of 0, that's going to mess with that calculation, because now it's going to see that this value is not blank, right? So now it's calculating these and going up to 35,000. And so if you want to use the offset function in this case, it's important to leave those values completely blank, just to make sure that it's not picking up that cell as being a non-blank value. Because by putting in a 0, it's going to say, okay, there is something in there, and it's going to be counting that. So if you're calculating year-to-date values and that sort of stuff, and you want to use the offset function in this case, then just leave those values blank. And that way, that'll ensure that it's not calculating values that you don't want it to. And that makes it a lot easier to ensure that it's only picking up data that's already been entered and values that are already in there.